Welcome to the entertaining Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And before I get started, just want to let everybody know that tonight, around 6:30, I will be live for the NFC title game with Bad Dog Sports. Before that, I will be live on his channel. I'm assuming at around 3 o'clock for the AFC Championship game as we do the play-by-play on both channels. Hope you guys swing by for that. But in this video, I'm going to talk about Jason Garrett and what he had to say about Daniel Jones, about how excited he is to work with this quarterback, but also about what he intends to do with the offense as a whole. And I think it's some pretty encouraging stuff that he had to say, and I think it's some common sense stuff, some things that he's instilled in his offenses in the past, but I wanted to hit home with it. I'm also going to talk about what the New York Giants did yesterday in terms of the East-West Shrine game. Now, it's not a game of, huge notoriety, but it's an all-star game for college players. It was on the NFL Network, and after the game, they interviewed 20 players. And one thing that, in terms of the offense that I thought was interesting, it was actually brought up by Giants Wire, was the types of wide receivers that they interviewed. So I want to get into that, how they're going to fit in the system. Now, I don't think this system, when you listen to Jason Garrett, is going to be a system that is, married to any one philosophy. Yes, I do think that they're going to install the core principles of the Air Coryell, where you need tall wide receivers on the outside, where you want to have the ability to throw deep passes when the defense allows it. But I think they're going to mix and match like Jason Garrett has done his entire career with the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of people hear about the Air Coryell offense, and the reason that it was instilled was Dan Fouts had a big arm. And they say Daniel Jones really isn't known for elite arm strength. He may have average arm strength, but he's not a gunslinger like a Brett Favre or someone like that. And that's a fair thing to say. But what I say to that is Dak Prescott and Tony Romo don't have great arm strength either. As a matter of fact, Dak Prescott probably has below average arm strength, but he was able to succeed with this offense because they had a balanced offense with the offensive line, with the running attack, and things like that. And that's something that Jason Garrett really hit home when pressed upon it with Sports Illustrated. He also, he did a couple interviews yesterday. He did one with Giants.com. I listened to a great interview. If you haven't done so, please check it out. But he was asked about his relationship with Joe Judge as well. And he said, right out of the gate, they had great chemistry. They both believe in the same core principles. They want to be able to run the ball down your throat. They believe that games are won in the trenches, things like that. And then, obviously he flew to New Jersey and they signed the contract. But him and Joe Judge seemed to hit it off right away. And hopefully it's a great marriage. And he was really, really thrilled to get a chance to work with Daniel Jones. And one thing I'll say about that, this guy's a former quarterback. I don't think he would have taken this job if he didn't like Daniel Jones. His whole career relies on the quarterback position. His two biggest accomplishments, in my opinion, are Tony Romo and Dak Prescott. And that's his expertise. He came up as a quarterback's coach. He's a former quarterback. I don't think he would have taken the New York Giants job if he didn't like what Daniel Jones had to bring to the table. So I think at the end of the day, Jones and what this offense could potentially do with Saquon Barkley and the other pieces are why this guy took the job, and he thinks he could succeed. Because after all, if Daniel Jones fails, Jason Garrett is going to have a very hard time finding a head coaching job somewhere else, which is probably his ultimate goal. I'm sure he wants to get another opportunity to be a head coach. For that to happen, Daniel Jones will have to be successful for Garrett and the New York Giants. But I wanted to jump into some of the quotes off the mouth about from Jason Garrett, talking about Daniel Jones and just the Giants offense in general, and then I'll pull up some of the players that they interviewed at that East-West Shrine game and how I think it's starting to show you what they plan to do with their offensive philosophy. But, the first thing I wanted to pull up was this. This was Jason Garrett talking about his time with the Cowboys when he evaluated Daniel Jones. And you may read this and say, well, why would they have looked at Daniel Jones? They had Dak Prescott. Well, a couple things. One, Daniel Jones at first was projected to be in the second round. And maybe they were thinking about drafting him, not knowing if they were going to keep Dak Prescott long term. But even if that's not the case, you still want to evaluate every player in the draft, because what if they end up on one of your rivals like Daniel Jones did? You want to know everything you can about these players, and this is what he said the Cowboys and himself thought about Daniel Jones over the draft process. We, the Cowboys, thought a lot of him coming out of college, said Garrett. We weren't in the market for a quarterback in the first round, but you still go through the evaluation process. Anyone that was around him in our organization with the Cowboys just thought the world of him. He was highly regarded on our draft board. And you're starting to hear this a lot about Daniel Jones after the fact. He seemed to be the best kept secret in last year's draft. And then this was another thing he had to say about Daniel Jones regarding Jones as a player and, what he thinks he could bring to the New York Giants. Yeah, he was a really impressive college player. It's not surprising to us that he was drafted as high as he was. Just a really talented guy. He's big. He's athletic. He can throw the ball. He can make plays in the pocket. He can make plays out in space with his feet. He keeps his eyes up. Makes a lot of plays when he's on the move, throwing the ball down the field. Plays with competitive spirit. He's someone who seems calm and poised, handling it all really well and getting better and better every week. We are very impressed with him. So I'm guessing that quote was while he was with the Dallas Cowboys. But either way, he is a big fan of Daniel Jones. Like I said, he's not taking this job if he's not. And everything he said there, I think, is accurate. I think he does keep his eyes down the field. That was one thing I definitely noticed about him. You go back and look at the film analysis I did of him before the year started. You go back and look at him at Duke. That's one thing you could say about him. He was never scared to take a hit. He always tried to get the most out of plays. Obviously, he can make plays with his feet. He's very athletic, and it'll be interesting to see if Jason Garrett instills more RPOs this year with the New York Giants, giving them the ability to do that. Obviously, you don't want to do it too much. Daniel Jones, of course, already suffered an injury. But when you listen to Garrett, when I'm going to get into more of these quotes, it sounds more and more like Joe Judge with the versatility aspect. But, of course, very encouraging things there about Daniel Jones. This is the next thing I wanted to pull up. He was asked about the play-action pass. And the play-action pass is very important. And it was a big reason why Pat Shurmur got the job. Shurmur was known as Mr. Play-Action. Case Keenum had the highest passer rating with Minnesota out of the play-action in 2017. And a lot of Giants fans were looking forward to him bringing that to the New York Giants. We saw it the second half of 2018 with Eli Manning when they brought him under center and what it could do to a defense. But, of course, you got to be able to run the ball effectively for the play action to really work to its full potential. But this is what he had to say about the play action. Yeah, I think the play action is a really important play about good offensive football. You want to attack a defense in different ways. You want to run it. You want to throw it. You want to be able to throw it different ways. Quick game, intermediate game, deep, in, drop back, but also the play action movement game. So, yeah, I mean, and for anybody that's worried about, being married to the Air Coryell offense, deep throws, I wouldn't worry about that. Jason Garrett, to me, throughout his career, has shown a lot of versatility in terms of play calling, giving the quarterback multiple routes to throw to, whether it's a check down to Jason Witten or whether it's throwing a deep 50-50 ball to Des Bryant. But what it takes for deep 50-50 balls is tall wide receivers, and I'll get into that in a second in terms of players that they interviewed at the East-West Shrine game. But yeah, he continues to talk about versatility in the offense, and it sounds more and more like Joe Judge. That's all Joe Judge has preached on both sides of the football, which is why they probably got along so well in their interview. Next thing he wanted to talk about, he was asked to elaborate on what a balanced offense is. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but here's what Garrett had to say. I think all of it. If you can only do one thing as an offense, ultimately defenses and defensive coordinators do a great job at taking that away from you, which is why I say the run game is still vitally important in the NFL. You need a balanced offense. By no means is it strictly a run game, but the run game sets up the pass. It always has, it always will, and Jason Garrett seems to realize that. So the best offenses we've been around are the ones that could run the ball, throw the ball, and run it different ways. Inside, outside, gap. Run it with different guys. And the same thing with the passing game. And that's something I continue to harp on. I want to be able to run it with different guys. I want to establish a strong backup running back to spell Saquon Barkley, to give the defense a different look. Have a guy that could jam it down their throat right up the middle, take that beating on the short yardage plays. But yeah, I like to hear that, man, that they plan to go inside, outside, things like that. You want to mix it up. And then he says, if you have a variety with your passing game, you can throw the ball different ways to different people and execute all of those things. That's what the best offenses are able to do. And when you look at this New York Giants receiving core right now, they kind of have a lot of similar players. Yes, Darius Slayton's a deep threat on the outside, but he's not the tallest of guys. He's 6'1", I think. Might be 6'2", but I think he's 6'1". Tate, Shepard, those are smaller guys. Ingram's a tall target, but he's out of the tight end spot. They could use a burner, and they could use a tall wide receiver, which is why I wanted to pull this up and why I thought it was interesting what Giants Wire talked about in their article regarding the players that were interviewed at the East-West Shrine game. Now, take this with a grain of salt because they didn't interview any tackles. They interviewed 20 players. None of them were offensive tackles. They interviewed 5 offensive guards. And if you look at the Giants' offensive line, that's the one spot where you could have some confidence in, even though Will Hernandez regressed a bit this year. But between Hernandez and Zeitler, you project those two to be the starters. Obviously, they're probably looking at depth with most of these players, guys that are going to be on the bench as backups. But they also interviewed 5 wide receivers. And all 5 of them were 6'3", or taller. So I think, to me, this is kind of a hint or an indicator of what type of wide receiver the New York Giants are going to be looking for in this offseason. And it only makes sense when you run an Air Coryell offense like Jason Garrett does, even though obviously he's not going to be strictly committed to that. You want to have tall wide receivers like a Plaxico Burress was for Eli Manning early in his career that could go up and catch those 50-50 balls, that could be a threat in the red zone, on the outside at the 50-yard line, things like that to take it to the house. So that is one thing that I thought was interesting at the East-West Shrine game. Of all 5 wide receivers that they did interview were all very tall, and it seems like that is what they're looking to add for Daniel Jones this offseason. Will it be a high-profile guy? I don't know. Will it be, a guy they try to find in the later rounds like a Darius Slayton? Very possible. It's a very deep wide receiver draft from everything you read, and we'll see what Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman do in the draft to try to find guys that fit this offense. But as always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.